Everyone in the village admired Jacob. They called him the hardest worker they knew. He woke before sunrise. He worked until the sky went dark. His hands were always rough, his clothes always dusty. Jacob believed in one thing more than anything else. Work harder than everyone else, and life will reward you. And for a long time, that belief kept him going. His farm stretched across dry land on the edge of the village. While others rested, Jacob kept moving, plowing, planting, repairing fences, carrying heavy loads alone. People often told him, "You work too much." Jacob would smile and say, "Hard work never fails." But there was something they didn't see. Every season, despite all his effort, his harvest was never as good as he expected. Not terrible, just disappointing. Enough to survive, never enough to grow. Jacob blamed the weather, the soil, bad luck. So he worked harder. Longer days, shorter sleep, less rest. He pushed himself until exhaustion felt normal. One afternoon, as he stood in the field, wiping sweat from his face, he noticed something strange. The crops in one small corner of his land looked weaker than the rest, yellowing, thin. He frowned. "I worked this part just as hard," he thought. Jacob bent down, scooped a handful of soil, and let it fall through his fingers. Something felt off, not wrong enough to stop him, not clear enough to fix. So he ignored it. He straightened up, grabbed his tools, and kept working. Because in Jacob's mind, effort solved everything. And mistakes only belonged to people who didn't try hard enough. The days that followed were even harder. Jacob woke up earlier than before. He stayed in the fields longer. If the sun burned, he endured it. If his back ached, he ignored it. He told himself this was the price of success. But no matter how much effort he poured in, that weak corner of the field kept spreading, slowly, quietly. Yellow leaves reached into healthy rows. Thin stems leaned against stronger ones. Jacob noticed it every day. And every day, he chose the same response. "I just need to work more." So he added more water, more hours, more force. He dug deeper trenches, pulled weeds until his hands bled, carried heavier loads than necessary, just to prove he wasn't quitting. Neighbors passed by and shook their heads. One of them stopped and said gently, "Jacob, maybe it's not about how hard you're working." Jacob didn't answer. He didn't like that sentence. Because if hard work wasn't the problem, then something else was. And something else meant stopping long enough to think. That night, Jacob sat on the edge of his bed, exhausted beyond words. His body was empty, his mind still racing. He replayed the season in his head, the planting, the watering, the timing. And for the first time, a thought crept in that made him uncomfortable. What if I'm repeating the same mistake? Perfectly. The next morning, instead of starting immediately, Jacob stood still in his field, just for a moment. He looked closely at the soil again, at the way water pooled instead of soaking in, at how that weak corner always dried last. Something was wrong beneath the surface, not with his effort, but with his approach. Jacob felt a strange resistance inside him. Stopping felt like failure, thinking felt like wasting time. But the field didn't care how hard he worked. It only responded to what was done right. And that truth was getting harder to ignore. Jacob didn't change everything at once. At first, he only slowed down. That felt unnatural to him. His hands kept reaching for tools, even when his mind wasn't sure what to do next. Years of habit don't disappear quietly. He walked the field again, step by step, not working, just observing. The weak corner caught his attention immediately. He knelt down and dug a little deeper than before. Not fast, not forcefully. What he found stopped him. The soil underneath was packed too tightly, hard, dry beneath the surface. Water wasn't sinking in, it was running off. All those extra hours of watering, all that effort, had been sitting on top, never reaching the roots. Jacob felt a dull heaviness in his chest. He remembered rushing that part of the land early in the season, skipping a step, telling himself he'd fix it later. Later never came. Instead, he had worked around the problem, harder and harder, without ever touching it. He sat back on his heels, dirt on his hands, staring at the ground. For the first time, Jacob understood something clearly. Hard work had been covering his mistake, not fixing it. That realization stung more than exhaustion ever had, because it meant this wasn't bad luck. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't fate. It was a small decision he ignored and kept ignoring because stopping to correct it felt slower than pushing forward. Jacob stayed there longer than necessary, not because he didn't know what to do next, but because accepting the truth took time. Eventually, he stood up and made a quiet choice, not to work harder, but to work differently. The change wasn't dramatic. Jacob didn't announce anything, didn't rush, didn't push himself to exhaustion. He started by fixing what he had skipped. He loosened the soil slowly, carefully, letting air and water reach places they never had before. It took time. It took patience. For the first few days, nothing seemed different. That tested him more than hard labor ever had. But Jacob stayed with it. He worked less, but with attention. He rested more, but without guilt. And then, quietly, the field responded. New shoots appeared in the weak corner. Leaves grew thicker. Color returned. Not because he worked harder, but because he stopped ignoring what mattered. By the end of the season, the harvest wasn't perfect, but it was better. And for the first time, Jacob felt something he hadn't felt in years: relief. He realized how close he had been to burning himself out while fixing nothing. How easy it is to mistake effort for progress. How comforting it is to believe more work solves every problem. Hard work isn't useless, but without awareness, it can keep you stuck in the same mistake forever. Jacob stood at the edge of his field as the sun went down, hands resting on the fence. He wasn't proud of how much he had worked. He was grateful he had finally paid attention, because effort moves you forward, but only understanding shows you where to go.